All right. Good afternoon. I am Anto Budiojo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern to figure out the future of smart buildings. We are listed, the panelists are listed on mondaylive.org in case you are wondering who we are. Just to point out that views expressed here are personal and not of any company or organization. Please do post questions and comments on the Zoom chat so we can make this as interactive as possible. This slide deck that I'm showing is on mondaylive.org right there on the homepage in case you need any of the information that's on it. We have been, for November, been talking about the future of system integration. And so this is the last week, being the 28th. This is our agenda for today, our normal chit chat to start things off, and then talk about the future of integration. And really, we really want to focus on the tools of the trade. What system integrators need to actually function in their task. But before we get into that, Ken, what's going on?
Thanks, Anto. You gonna flip the slide there or not?
It is there.
No, it's not.
Not flipping, yeah.
Not flipping.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what's going on anyway. So our new reinvention is going well. I think I'm pleased that the interaction we're getting with the industry. We're starting to get some pretty good support from our sponsors. And,
sorry, I'm just putting it back.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on here.
It's technical issue day.
Technical issue day.
Okay, well, I'll just keep talking then. Yeah, so it's all going well. Real pleased. I've got a couple of new contributing editors coming on from the lighting industry, which is sort of an area that we've not had a bold position in, but it's I think it's very much a part of what we need to, the messages we need to carry. So looking forward to that. We're hard at putting together our program for Atlanta. Here we go. And we've getting again more sponsors and speakers. We're starting to identify the speakers and we're starting to put together the speaking plates. We're hoping to get more information about the Monday Live mega session that's going on and who's going to be speaking there, so we can help promote that as well. I think you've got some stuff you're trying to put together, Anto. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about that later and how that may dovetail in with what your presentation is going to be. I did a LinkedIn post on a little Raspberry Pi module, and I was amazed at the interest I got on that. And I think what it kind of indicates is that we have to keep watching what the industrial control industry is doing, because a lot of these products are starting to look an awful lot alike, and the capabilities and the price level. Industrial stuff is coming down, capabilities are going up, and some pretty exciting stuff happening there that's going to, I think, affect our industry. I wrote this article for Contractor and talking about the importance of HTML. And my quote is that we can link to anything in this new meta world we wish to communicate to our audience, yet we still think and work as if we're in paper. We've still got this thing that folks tend to want to write it in a Word file and they want to send it to you to have somebody be their HTML wrangler. And what I'm trying to do with the new website is basically empower everybody to be an HTML wrangler and let them speak and get their information out there, because that's more or less the way it's moved through social media. It's working well. It's interesting to see this transition. A lot of folks that have a strong presence, they've just turned it over and it's seamless kind of thing, nice nice stuff appears. That works out pretty well. So anyway, we're trying to close that gap. Lots of interesting stuff going on there. Okay, you back? Are you okay now? Back to you. Or do you want me to keep talking?
No, you're good. I think I figured out what the problem was. I had a checkbox that shouldn't have been checked. But anyway, yeah, I'll have that information to you about the session later this week, and we'll talk about it next week at the next Monday Live. Again, so that'd be great.
Okay, good.
So, Mark.
So, a topic of discussion on Monday Live that we have, and it continually goes up, is the whole ESG sustainability movement that is occurring, whether talk or actual building owners and operators doing it. This kind of was really interesting for me, is that the EU adopted the new legislation that's been before them for the last, I don't know, however long. Roger, you may know, I don't. But what's interesting is that, one, is that look at the rules will begin applying by the beginning of 2024 for large public interest companies with over 500 employees, followed by companies with more than 250 employees or less than or 40 million in pounds revenue for 2025 and so forth. A couple questions that I have for discussion is this. Is this enough to motivate us in the US to get some type of compliance, regulatory stuff that's been on people's discussion tables for several months now? Is this enough to motivate those owners and operators who kind of had a toe in the water, but now it's time to take that big plunge? And what does it mean for the industry, us, if anything? So I think this is the beginning of we're finally getting our hands around how we're going to report this information, that we're getting closer to some kind of guideline, some kind of standard. So
I think, Mark, it's interesting, right? I think for large global companies who've got presence in, in the EU and APAC and everywhere else, by having the EU do this, they're going to have to comply, right? So it would make sense that they would take what reporting structures that they've got in the EU, back into the US, because, well, okay, I've done it there, might as well just do it here, right?
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you get a big impact initially on the large corporates. I'm not sure about the next step down.
yeah, and I would agree with that, in that many of these large corporate have already gone out publicly and already committed to some kinds of dates, and whether it be net zero or something in the whole ESG realm of things. So I think you're right there. And again, I think the public companies, that's what shareholders are looking for. So obviously there's a different motivating factor versus some of the private companies and or all smaller companies. But I have to say, in my discussions and meetings, conferences and whatever, it is part of the conversation. ESG for sure, sustainability, whatever, is part of the conversation for sure.
Do you know, Mark, does this piece talk about the alignment between this regulation and what's happening in the US with ESG, even though it's not as well advanced?
I have no idea. My guess is probably not, but who knows, but you never know. You never know. I guess, I don't know if it was in the link, which obviously I've included here, but anyway, don't know.
I guess the thing about this is at least they will have a framework to work with, which before, could be reporting on anything, but now they'll have at least a framework to which they can actually at least report on.
And that's the key, Roger. And one of the things I have found in looking into this and, you know, doing stuff in it is that everybody, there was no centralized way to report the information. Everybody, you got 50 people reporting, you got 65 different ways that they were doing it. So I think this, to your point, is exactly spot on.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. Any other news, thoughts, or things anyone want to bring up before we move on?
Has anyone given more thoughts to the large number of layoffs in the tech field and the impact that people are seeing on that?
We talked about that a little bit last week.
Yeah.
With Mark and John having just got back from San Jose.
So my question in this whole thing too is, how can we, our industry, take advantage of it with some of these folks that obviously are looking for new opportunities and get them into our industry? And obviously from a technical perspective, I mean, we've got needs in virtually almost every category within our industry. We all know that. But at the same time here you have a whole new group of technology savvy individuals. Let's make some assumption. And how can we convince them to look within our industry? I don't have that answer. But
surely the critical part of that, answering that, is to make this space look much more like high tech and much more like the issues that are typically of the high tech sector. And I don't know how far we are from that.
Do we know the breakdown in terms of, well, I don't know whether there's been anything published of the sort of people they've been letting go. Are they admin based or technology based? You know, are they from the finance department or marketing? I don't know.
Well, the Google announcement last couple of weeks has been they're trying to identify the lowest productive coders, the 10,000 lowest productive coders, to get rid of them. So that gives some hint, and that being not good coders.
Well, and Elon just did that with Twitter, right? He had all the software people come in on whatever it was, Saturday and Sunday last weekend or the weekend before, and you had to bring an example of your most, creative bit of software. And if you think and he had a review team, if they thought it wasn't up to snuff, you're out of there. So yeah.
I think it's across the board, but heavily weighed towards the technical side, to developers, coders, as we were just talking, and so forth and so on. But it sure represents another good opportunity for the industry to go fishing to catch some of these folks. It would be great.
Any other thoughts? All right, let's move on then to the future of system integration. And we have a guest that I'm going to press this button so that we can allow him to talk. He is just on phone and audio. So Pete Chicarelli, welcome to Monday Live. If you can unmute yourself, you should be able to talk. Ask to unmute. I cannot do that from my end. And I don't know how you're going to do that on your phone.
How about now?
Oh, that sounds great. So maybe Steve, do you want to
Yeah, let me do a little introduction. Pete. So Pete and I have known each other for some time in the industry, and he's currently the National Solutions Architect for Alberio Energy. And he's a very experienced individual in this whole area of systems integration, having spent 10 years in process control before moving into primarily the building automation world, where he's got over 20 years of experience there. And when we were talking about this topic for this month, really Pete came to mind because I know I'm familiar with the kind of challenges he faces in his job with Alberio with regard to all of the work that sits above the control system. And that's increasingly a large part of what is being asked of systems integrators today, is not just to, achieve set point on an air handler, but to take advantage and make all the data do the kinds of things it needs to do. And so I thought Pete would be a great person to expound upon his experience in that area. And so here he is.
Great.
Hello, everybody.
So do you want to introduce yourself and sort of tell us what your focus is these days in terms of system integration, and especially we want to sort of talk about tools and the technology and the platforms that you tend to use or need to use. Leave it to you, Pete.
Sure. So we've came a long way. We put a lot of acronyms on things throughout the years. So we went from a standard integration tool like a unit or VFD, and then we went beyond that to a protocol-driven solution where we were taking two wires and taking a Modbus protocol as such and pulling all that data for half the cost, right? And then we've migrated so far. So my job used to be to make sure the gateways like field server and such and anybody out there would have to be communicating with different field technologies. So now I have to be a full-blown network engineer. So it's moved from a field level architecture and topology to an IT realm. With that said, concurrently, what has happened is during that transition, we had a ton of startups, right? Engineering firms, engineering houses that were doing FDD, they were doing building automation, they were laying software on top of Sky Foundry Phantom engines and stuff like that. And I think Mark said earlier about, cutting the cord or drawing the line. I still think I'm going to give the comparison. I still think we're taking that shopping cart through the grocery store and we haven't checked out yet. And we keep dumping things into the cart. So what I've seen is that there's really no one that has actually taken hold of the entire MSI. Now, let's work our way up. The SI used to be the field level system integrator that would take this and that and the other thing. Well, that was all field driven, field bus driven. So if you take that and you put it in today's terms, that's still there. And it's almost weird because we're almost migrating back to it because IT is like, oh my God, I don't want all these IT devices on my network. I don't want to manage them. I don't want to do converged networks. I don't want to do air gap. I don't do anything. So what the SI's role is becoming more of an MSI, meaning that the MSI will always bridge the gap between software and hardware. And it's just, I don't know, what I do every day is, like use cases, for example. So let's say we have, a 2 million square foot office rise. So there's use cases. So no one really understands the fact that to make these use cases happen, there has to be metrics down below at the VMS level, at the APMS level, at the data center level, at every level to make these use cases happen. So what the problem I'm finding with MSI is we don't really have a role. So if you have an MEP that is contractually obligated to hire you to bring this all together, but you can't you can't manage the contractors, you're really left in this purgatory. So what I'm trying to do is make MSI or SBS or whatever we call it more of a central repository or location for everything encompassing. So it's become more of a, like almost a traffic cop in a sense. Like everything's going to the edge. The MSI is no longer just a Modbus or a field bus protocol, but you have to know APIs. You have to know REST APIs. You have to know all that stuff to be able to bring all this information into the server. And we have to deal with different softwares, different hardwares. We're seeing a dissipation of gateways. While some are good, I mean, that's not the objective of IoT. IoT is supposed to be edge to edge, you know, and that's it. So it's been a struggle because I just don't see anyone, and the big, I call them the whales, they're coming up with lots of good stuff. The JCIs, the Siemens, Distech has an amazing controller right now that touches on, Mark touched on earlier, that actually leaves the realm of BMS. And it enters another entity with computing, cloud computing. So it's becoming more and more strategic. But here's what I personally think, and I wanted to say this in front of everybody, is that I think we lost track of the basic fundamentals. And so with that, what I mean by that is to make all this stuff be single pane of glass or integrated or whatever, you have to do your job at the bottom. And I think we lost track of that with all these APIs, these engineering firms that are these startups and all this grabbing the data and doing all this wonderful stuff with it. That's great, but you're only as good as the value that you're given. So what I'm trying to do in my team is to start policing or provisioning down at the field level what is given by the BMS, the lighting. Another good point someone made, I think it was Ken, about the lighting. We need to know what they're giving to us. We need to know what the elevator company's giving to us. We need to know what the EPMS company's doing, you know, giving to us, so we can fulfill these use cases in BMS, which is an integrator. So my opinion is we're still, I don't really see a one-punch hit out there in the market. Again, the whales are coming up with OpenBlue is a really nice product. Distech has a nice product. Alberton has nice products. Everybody has nice products. I've been doing tritium since 1999. And I just think that I think we're just getting away. And it might sound reverse of what you're all thinking, but I think we're getting away from the basics. So what I'm trying to do is get, you know, EPMS lighting back to 101 so that we can fulfill these use cases for the client, both core and shell, tenant fit out, whatever. I'll design networks all day long, but again, we're only as good as the information that we're given.
It's an interesting state of affairs that you're portraying.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
And I have to deal with this constantly. Yeah. There's really good software out there. There's lots of tools. There's the healthcare system where we have the HL7. There's, you know, the BMS where we have the haystack and brick and all that kind of stuff like that. But I don't really see, you know, we started way back when with haystack, right? That was going to be our, you know, our go-to market. But everybody keeps reinventing the wheel, and we're taking the lead. Honestly, what I see, being completely candid, we're taking the lead from like the Googles and the Microsofts. So Google comes up with brick, and so our industry wants to adopt the brick technology. Well, does it really fit? Does it really, you know, trump haystack? I don't know. Haystack's a pretty nice tagging infrastructure. So, yeah, so that's my biggest struggle is not writing APIs or doing integration at the cloud level to CMMS systems or to anything like that, or cloud computing. It's more of the fundamental basics of implementation of basic infrastructure is my biggest challenge.
So you're talking about the infrastructure that is needed all the way from the lower levels of the field devices, potentially all the way
absolutely
up, all the way up.
Absolutely. Yep.
Up and down.
Yep. And that's where the SIs and the MSIs, they work in conjunction with each other. So it's a propagated system. So you have to get your installation done. The SI has to make sure it works. The MSI has to make sure it fits the bill of the use cases and for the client expectations. So what we're finding is that the SIs and the MSIs are ready. They're ready to go. But on the deliverables, from the contractual standpoint, it's not in there. So, for example, if you have a ATS or a substation or something that you need data to do, some kind of MSI implementation, or as we call it, a use case, it's not there. So that's been our biggest thing. I think another big thing of ours, big challenge for me, is getting in early. That is super important. But as far as technologies,
you mean early in a project?
Absolutely. But the thing is, the MSI or system integration is not brought in until after the fact. The contracts are signed. There's field testing done, out the door. Here comes the equipment. It's programmed with this, lever crack units, scroll units for data centers, whatever. They're here. So now you have to, the MSIs and the SIs have to work in conjunction with each other to actually adhere to a contract that they really can't fulfill because of all the missing data.
So Pete, this is Mark.
So I think hey, Mark.
Hey, so let me ask you this. So in your kind of description here and sharing your thoughts, you've mentioned MSI multiple times, which again, this audience, Monday Live, we have discussed MSIs and the role of an MSI for, many times. My question for you is this: in this whole thing, is the concept of a MSI still misunderstood? And is there a trust factor that's missing at the building owner operator level for the role of an MSI?
Spot on. Absolutely. And and to your point, Mark, is that what happens is, again, we're the middleman, right? Middle woman, middle man. And what happens is, we have these engineering firms that are coming in and they're saying, okay, give me a whitelist SSL 443 to your building, give me a VPN to your building, and we're going to do everything, Mark. We're going to do, just give me an IP address and we're going to do everything. The problem is they're software developers. They're computer science majors. I'm an electrical engineer by trade. But, this is what's happening. And yes, we're misunderstood. I was on a huge project in New York City. And the contractor at the end of the job said, you know what, I'm never going to hire an MSI again. And I said, well, why? He said, I'm going to get the BMS to do it. They're going to do it all. It makes no sense for you to be in the middle. I thought it was the most profound statement ever. I'm looking at a man that, is the head of one of the biggest contracting companies in the world. And I said, you're going to make a grave mistake. So he carried on and did another project, and it failed miserably. But I do think, Mark, to your point, that we are really under, how can I say it? We're not taken to the point where general contracting goes, meaning you have client expectations and you have, lower level expectations. In the middle, to make all this work together, you need an MSI. I mean, you really do. So I don't think there's ever going to be, there's never going to be a gap or a void that MSI, can't fulfill.
So Pete, just listening to you, you mentioned you agree with Mark that the role of the MSI is still not well understood in the industry, number one, and then two, because MSIs aren't brought in early in the process and higher up in the food chain, it's very difficult to influence the building owner and the general as to what's going to be needed for this whole project to be successful.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's no importance, like Mark was alluding to. I think he was. There's no importance to it, and you're brought into these use cases. They're called use case labs or whatever, and you even break ground yet, and you're providing use cases from a building consultant, which these guys and girls are amazing. But here's the thing, I have to make that happen. You're hiring me to make this happen. I have no idea. I see the cake. I have no idea what the ingredients are. So that has been my biggest struggle. It's not been with software. There's plenty of good stuff out there, and it keeps evolving, and it's going to keep doing good. And I keep my my finger on the press. But yeah, it's been for me the biggest struggle is digressing. So doing a job and then going back and really having a hard time completing the job because you are obligated to complete a certain part of the contract, which was use case or integration. And the data's not there. And the contractor's done. He's like, well, I don't work for you.
So just to be clear,
I don't work for you.
When you say the data's not there, you mean the system that won the contractor that won the bid for that portion of the work. Literally the points that might be connected to it or the values that might be calculated aren't there because they didn't know to do it, or it's not even something they have a capability for in their product.
They have no idea of the top level expectations. They just know that a unit is supposed to do what it's supposed to do. And they come in, they do their startup, their factory, their labor, their whoever, and they come in and do their job and they walk away. So I, come across a lot of times where I have to connect to their device and actually reprogram their device. And so it's like, why? This is not my responsibility. So we go over on our budget, and the expectations are not. There's no connectivity. There's no cohesiveness between the lower level and upper level. And I hate to digress on this call, but that's been my biggest struggle, Steve, is with expectations of the client from the top to the bottom and bottom to the top.
Yeah.
We can deliver single pane of glass any day. Make graphics with squirrels in the squirrel cage. We can do anything you want. But the thing is, the data that you're given for fault detection, analytics, that is super crucial to deliver the ultimate, portfolio level FDD, equipment level FDD, single pane of glass and everything. And it's been my biggest thing. And I don't know where the MSI fits in the contractual agreement. This has been my biggest struggle, is like, do we go in underneath the BMS? Do we go underneath the MEP? Or do we go underneath the client? So I don't know. It's been so many different approaches that I don't really know. But if we got us in earlier, we police everything, believe it or not. We're more important than people think, because we can do everybody. It's like my father said, being an electrician, you can do everybody else's job, but nobody can do your job. It's the same principle, is that we can do all your jobs. We can program your air handlers, whether you're automated logic, distech, or whatever, general controls, don't care. But you can't do our job, which is bringing all these systems together.
Pete, this is Roger Woodward from UK. Pete, you touched on something which I think is the challenge for the MSI role at the moment, is that it's reasonably new to the market, and you end up acting almost as a consultant to the client, because he's kind of leaning on you to say, look, I want to make sure that this gets implemented. The mechanical contractor leans on you because he's not quite sure how to do it. The consultant has specified something that maybe he's picked up from something else. So you end up as this middle road, but it's then who do you actually sit with? And one of the things that maybe it will evolve too, which we've always in this industry tried to get closer to the client, we're always normally stuck in the middle. Do you think the MSI role will kind of evolve to being closer to the client now because you're helping to implement what he set out in the first place?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. What happens is the client expectations. We're the first in and we're the last out. So what happens is the expectations from the MEP or their general contractor is, we're going to pay you to do this job. The client expectations are different. I don't know the answer to that question. And here's why I don't know the answer to the question. Because most of these software companies are, again, and like I said in the beginning of this conversation, they're trying to do everything. They're trying to do point A to point B. So they're trying to make everything edge, everything, network, IT, and everything. And they just want to come in, plop some software on top of there, make it all work with, fault detection analytics and UI UX, whatever the magnitude, and they're trying to take away the MSI. And what I keep trying to tell people is that I don't think you'll ever get rid of the MSI. The SI, I don't know. I mean, the industry has superseded SIs. They've come to another layer of the network where they're not relying on field bus anymore. They're trying to go, all edge and Ethernet and whatever. I don't know, because these companies are trying to do this. I don't know what their intentions are, but there's a lot of good software out there, but I don't know where that is. And again, my biggest problem, and I talk to my company all the time about this, is where do we fit in? Like I said earlier about the contractual agreement. What is our obligation? Because I'll tell you, I'll give you a perfect example. The last job I did, big job I did, was 350,000 points. It was the entire building. There was 35 integrations. There was EPMS, all the electrical from the street all the way up. And I would go to these vendors and I would say, I need you to check out this branch circuit monitoring, make sure the access is right. I'm getting conflicts. I don't work for you. So now I just wasted my entire day. And I'm like, okay, so who do I got to go to? And there's nobody to look for. So to your point, Roger, I don't think that we've actually found our niche in the contract. I know we're needed, but I don't think we found our niche in the stream or the process flow, workflow, if you will, of a contract with a client.
Hey, Pete, this is Arno. I think a lot of stuff that you're talking to about the MSI and trying to find the niche is, I think one of the things I've seen with the MSI role is they've kind of stepped into that vacuum that a lot of the consulting engineers have left in the space. You know what I mean? In the past, that role of trying to define what needs to be done and all the things that need to be integrated, how, and the data and everything else, was sort of a role for the consultant. Yet now we're finding that the MSI is sort of stepping in that space, but it's a bit of a unsanctioned role, if you know what I mean. I think we kind of created it to fill the gap, but the industry hasn't really sanctioned it as a true thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think we've always been a gray area, but I think more so than now, more so than the past, I'm sorry, is the gray area. So yeah, the building consultants, they come up with this ingenious plan, and nothing against building consultants, they're amazing. But the thing is, who makes this all happen? So we got A and we got B, but who connects the dots? That's your MSI and your SIs. So I think personally, at the end of the day, we need to take a more of a lead role, and be more empowered, because we know, again, we know we know everybody's job, and we want to make sure that the client is satisfied and the contract is satisfied. Sorry, I'm getting cold, and that things are okay, and that people are happy, because the software entity, oh my goodness, like again, back with the bricks and the haystacks and oh my God, they let them fight their fight. Let them go ahead. I mean, I love brick ontology. I mean, haystack relationships and are just perfectly fine for me. But if you want to go to brick, it's fine. Autonomy is big for me, huge. And I'll keep working in that sector, and that I call it that vertical. But we need to really establish the MSI influence on projects and how we roll into that in every vertical, whether it be more, medical, government, and they all have dispositions that are different. So a data center is going to be a different approach than a HL7. And then, your government work is going to be different than a data center and a HL7. So we have to approach them differently, but we can propagate or traverse those verticals if we play our cards right. We just need to know our place as an MSI, and I've struggled with that.
So Pete, it sounds like reporting to the GC directly as opposed to going through a mechanical is absolutely a requirement. But more than that, that's fine for maybe the flow of the money, but you still somehow you need to have that reporting relationship into the owner. It would seem to me to make this work. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because without the owner
game will.
I'm just saying that if you're having to always to go to the GC to get permission to talk to the owner or to get a question answered or to get clarification or just to meet with them on a regular basis, because during the course of the project you're going to need to do that. That's just, I don't see how that could work effectively unless it's very clear that as an MSI you have the right to engage with the owner however you need to do it.
Yeah, true. I'm going to divulge some information that I shouldn't probably, but 23 years, it's never worked. Never. Meaning they always go through the contractor and say, let's be literal, make Pete do his job. Okay.
Right.
At the end of the day, they get so fed up with all these contractors and they go, who's the wizard? Who's the guy behind the curtain? I want to talk to that guy. So then I step in and I'm like, here's me and my team. Oh my God, I wish I had you on board in the beginning, right? Yeah, so right. I think you're spot on, is that at the end of the day, we will go through the trials and tribulations of contracting. But at the end of the day, technology will always win, and the contract will always win. And the fact of the matter is the client will always win. We have to satisfy the client to be successful. So yes, absolutely. And it's never worked, Steve. They've went around me. They went around others in my team and said, they're contracted underneath you, make them work 24 hours a day until it's done. It's like, oh my goodness. So until we get to the end and they're just actually exhausted, Steve. They're exhausted. They're like, who's Pete Chicarelli? Can I talk to him, please? and they want to get their project, they want to get their tenants in, they want to start billing for their space, they want to start billing for, you know, colo sites, whatever, and they want it done. So I haven't, again, yeah.
I think the other point I want to clarify for everybody on the call here is when you talk about the software companies that are out there now that can basically grab data from just about anything, and it's not enough to just have the data. Like you said, it's got to be the right data, and in order to have the right data, you actually have to have a fundamental understanding of what that data is associated with. So if you don't understand EPMS or HVAC or lights and so on, if you can't have conversations with the companies that are providing those systems, it would seem to me if your play is purely as a software integration platform, you don't really know how to engage those other companies at the level of detail that you're going to need in order to fulfill the use cases. Is that what you were
Correct.
saying?
And I can, yeah, and I can write software every day, all day. It doesn't matter what the script is, Java, JavaScript, whatever.
Yeah.
That has never been a problem for me. It's always been, like you just said, it's been actually getting the right data to make these use cases happen, to make this, there's no benefit and from taking data like a space temperature, you know, back in the day, you know, Paul Serwin, I mean, it's my idol. He always said to me 20 years ago, he said, this thermostat crap is going away, bud. We need to find something else. So 1999, we invited Ed Merwin, Mark Peacock would know this. We invited Ed Merwin over to stand up JSMP. And we knew that the future was going to this, and it's slowly evolved, but I think we've rocket shipped so fast, Steve, that we lost basics. And we're seeing this on these jobs. And like you said, it's getting all this data, 300,000 points to the customer. Wow, great job. Now what?
Pete,
I mean, it sounds, it's a profound statement. It's like, I just brought you 300,000 points. I've sniffed your network, debugged it. You are not packet corrupting. You are not broadcasting. I got everything under control. Now what?
Pete, this is Jim Lee here for a minute.
Hey, Jim.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming. John Petsy and I have, for years on this program now, echoed your sentiments about back to basics and effectively having a premeditated understanding of what we're going to do with that data before we collect
Correct.
it. And that's really what I see you talking about here. And what I see in the back to basics problem is we've had all of these new entries come in who really don't understand two things about our industry. One is scale, the 300,000 points, and the other is time constants. Keeping those 300,000 points communicating and attached to whatever algorithms are yielding value over a 20-year period. Now, if you have interlopers coming in from IT, they do not have long time constants in anything they do, or generally not. I mean, I guess you could say COBOL and MacPack have been around for 40 years, but generally speaking, the latency of things in IT is very quick. The latency of how long the systems need to survive is a long time. And once again, that complexity, and this is why things like Haystack and BACnet and having fundamental technologies are so important. When somebody comes along and says, you know, well, MQTT is the answer, you know, it's the answer to what? A commodity bid on a wire? But where is the premeditated thought that has to go in? And the problem I have is, as you know, the owner, the consultants, the SIs, most people, if they actually haven't had to do it, scale it, run it, and keep it going for a long time, have no idea what we're talking about. How do we get over that education problem?
So I know, Petsy, I actually started Sky Foundry 15 years ago for Alberio. I wrote 99 rules in Sky Foundry. So what SkyFoundry is doing right now is they're actually coming up with, to your point, machine learning, right? But how do you machine learn without the metrics, right? So how is SkyFoundry or any fault detection supposed to do? But to your point, I think it's an acronym war. MQTT, love the protocol. There's a very, very low payload on the MQTT protocol, okay? It was built by an oil, it was for oil rigs, is actually what it was built for. And all of a sudden, it came out of the woodwork, MQTT. So, first it was mesh, then it was MQTT, then it was light waves. It's like, what are you selling us? And how can you as a technologist like Petsy or any software company keep up with that kind of constantly evolving software or technology?
But as you said,
the
acronyms are nonsense. The fundamentals that you're talking about in terms of how we represent information, what information we need to do to run those higher level analytics, to get the elevator to talk, to get the lighting system to talk. Those are basic fundamentals. And in a lot of these IT, higher level integrations that you talked about, somebody has to write a custom piece of software and then maintain that custom piece of software for the next 20 years. What a lot of people don't understand is the maintenance cost of that is going to just be backbreaking. And all of this stuff is going to be splintered on the floor by the time the trucks pull away from the job site, unless people adhere to these rules.
Yeah, and I think rules are fun. I would like to consider them fundamentals, like Jim, like you're saying. It's really like MQTT, great protocol. Do we really need it for this particular job? Not really. Not really, not really. For like a pharmaceutical joint that's, putting 5G cellular in, yeah, we'll consider it. But don't try to push technology on me because you're trying to make a difference in the technology world. That's what, again, I get these every day. I get emails from internal. Oh my God, you gotta look at this lighting company. Oh my God, you gotta look at this company. I'm like, oh my God, I can't keep up with the ones I have. So, and again, what happens is, Jim, to your point, and I think you've actually encapsulated on what I'm trying to say here, is that it gets really distorted when you try to keep up. And if we just stay with something, make it work, and then build off of that, then that's okay. But everybody's going in different directions. And again, there's plenty of software out there. There's plenty of acronyms to know. But at the end of the day, I need point A to point B to work properly. And like you said, Jim, the longevity of that data transfer or that latency or utilization is super, super important. You don't want to put 300,000 points in a building and have it dissipate into the abyss after 3 years, because of slackers on global controllers.
So Pete, there's some chit chat back and forth on the Zoom chat about the term orchestrator as basically the function of what you're describing, to orchestrate all of the different data sources and data usage that needs to be there for a build in a building. Do you think, as a concept, that's a good way of framing the problem that you're talking about? The need for need for somebody to orchestrate all of these things to work together.
Yeah, it's a very good term. And look, we've been evolving. I think we went from I don't even know what, BMS, BMA, SI, MSI, smart building, MSI. It just keeps evolving. I think an orchestrator is probably a really good term to say, because again, we're not just looking at an air handler or a static transfer switch or a rack mounted server or a DSIM or anything like that, or a PDU, whatever. We're looking at everything. So I think the MSI, believe it or not, again, I have to go back to, I don't think we've been accepted into a slot yet. But once we find our niche, I think people will realize how important this entity is as MSI.
So Pete,
as an orchestrator.
Yeah, Pete, with the challenges obviously you're highlighting here, how would you ultimately like to see it structured? Where should the MSI report? How should the project report, build around the MSI role? How would you like to see it structured?
I'd like to see us work for the client. I'd like to see us come right in for the client, be there at all the consultative meetings, the low-level meetings, for the equipment level. I'm talking at the field testing of the device, so that we can assure that what goes in is going to come all the way up to the top and be structured to do analytics effectively, to do everything. I don't think working underneath a GC or an MEP or anything like that really does us any justice. It puts us in a blame game. That's actually what it does. And I like to see us work for the client more, but I don't know how. I'm not a business person. I don't deal with numbers and stuff like that, but I don't know how we would approach that from a business aspect.
Which in theory, the consultant should be doing, right? That was his role
Correct.
originally, working on behalf of the client to make sure he got what he wanted. So,
I didn't say that, you did. Exactly. Yeah. But I think, you know what, actually, I think the consultants and the MSI should almost work together, because they have a vision and we have to fulfill that vision. So why not bring our expertise to the table preemptively and bring us in early in the game and say, we have 55 use cases on this site. We got 25 core and shelf. We have 25 tenant. What do you think? Well, I'm going to need these questions answered from you.
I have seen that here in the UK, certainly with Arabs working with the MSI closely and bringing it on behalf of the customer. It has happened.
Yeah. I just think at the end of the day, I think we need to be more engaged with all facets of the job, not just coming in to put a single pane of glass. How's that? We just don't want to be known as graphics people. We want to be known as integrators, and to bring all this data and useful data. Why would we bring stuff up to the top that really doesn't mean anything to anybody? Because I'll tell you, when I go into these sales calls, there's no building engineers anymore. There's one. There's real estate. There's investors. There's no building engineers. These folks want to know, what do you bring to the table from a enterprise aspect? You might get one building engineer to say, can you integrate my boilers? Okay. And this 2-hour conversation, and the real estate people take right over. So it's an enterprise aspect. It's an enterprise approach. But I think we need to get it down below and get things down below corrected, or we're just going to give them just, fictitious or erroneous data up top.
Okay, we're past the top of the hour, so we're going to bring this to a wrap. Anybody want to recap this? No.
I'll give it my take. Everything that Pete said about the MSI, I think the MSI is sort of stepping into a role that was supposed to be done by others, but in the process, we're not really advertising the value of an MSI, and I don't think people are getting the understanding of what an MSI really brings to the equation. Back to Pete's earlier statement of, I'll just get the BAS guy to do it. Really?
Yeah, that's a good thought. And I've always also thought about just the name Master System Integrator. I mean, it doesn't ring to that the problems or the function that been discussed here necessarily.
Right.
So that's why.
Yeah,
I think the orchestration, I think is a good word. I've not heard that one used before.
Absolutely.
I kind of like it because if you think of it in our social scenes, the orchestra manager of the symphony can kind of cross over a lot of boundaries, and he kind of trips between art and music and touchy feeling stuff, which a lot of this kind of rolls into. So yeah, good word, Tim. Thanks.
Yeah, I like it.
It's both technology and structure and relationships and everything else. So really interesting. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll add a little more to this as a summary, which is, we're here talking about how to make buildings smarter. So the perspective is the building, the entire building, and the industry has grown up as a group of silos, right? So you're the lighting guy, you're the fire guy, etc. But to make buildings what we're calling smart, the challenge is to pull all that stuff together. Well, who's responsible for pulling it all together? And the closest we've come so far is the role of the MSI. But if you really think through what, and you listen to what Pete is saying, the challenges he's facing, he's being given that challenge without the authority to act proactively and concurrently with all the players throughout the course of the project. He doesn't have that authority. And yet the owner wants that smart building. And the owner is bringing apparently fewer resources into the discussion up front. So he's even relying more on someone like an MSI to help achieve the outcome, right? Because he's not even bringing the senior facility guy into the picture. So this is a real challenge, and I really appreciate what all the candor that Pete has shared with us today, because I think he's given us real clarity around the difficulty that our industry faces in orchestrating all these different systems, not just integrating them, but orchestrating them, so that we fulfill our mission of having a smart building, and a building that isn't just smart on day one, but is smart on day 5 years and 10 years and 15 years later. That's a hell of a challenge. And I think Pete's articulated how big a challenge it is. We got work to do.
Okay, so 1 minute, nobody wants to talk and summarize them.
I just got one thing left. I just wanted to tell you guys, hey girls, thank you for dealing with me. I speak in cursive, I like to say. So thank you. I get sort of a machine brain, and I start thinking about things like that. But love to share. I don't get to share like this probably ever, and it's really good to get it out, because it's definitely a very viable topic in our industry, along with many others. But this is a huge one. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. We really appreciate it, and we'll get the video of this up next day or so, and we'll be back next week on Monday. So have a great week, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Good. Bye.